We're glad you've joined the April 2020 TAM customer webinar. This webinar is organized by the VMware TAM organization with the intent of providing our TAM customers the opportunity to hear great content and interact directly with great speakers that are delivering it. So please make use of the Q&A feature to ask any questions. And if your question doesn't get answered today, be sure to reach out to your TAM and ask them to follow up for you. Before we get into today's content, just a couple of basic announcements. First of all, our next TAM customer webinar will be on May 7th. We'll have the privilege of being joined by Kit Colbert. So Kit is the VP and CTO of the Cloud Platform Business Unit, and he'll be sharing with us some great insights on how VMware is your fastest path to modern applications. As I mentioned earlier, we want you to benefit from these sessions by interacting with the speaker. So if you have questions during today's webinar, use the Q&A feature and we'll address them during the webinar. And lastly, this webinar will be recorded and your TAM can make the recording link available to you. If you're an NBA basketball fan, you may be aware there's a pretty famous player that's known as just the kid from Akron, Ohio. Well, today our guest is an even more important kid from Akron, Ohio. Brian Madden is a household name in the virtual desktop and end user computing space. I first became familiar with Brian when I was a Windows Server 2003 admin, leveraged his terminal services book, and then had the privilege in 2007 to attend a conference that he hosted in Chicago called BriForum. I was excited to see him join VMware a couple years ago, and I'm even more excited to have him as a guest on today's webinar. If you look at his LinkedIn profile, you'll learn that his goal is to get fired for doing something awesome. Maybe today will be the day. Who knows? Brian, over to you.
Oh man, what a great introduction. Matt, fantastic. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. A couple points of clarification. Everyone from Akron is awesome, not just me and LeBron James.
Right.
And we this webcast, as you said, we want this to be interactive, so feel free to jump in. We've got the Q&A functionality open, so feel free to jump in with questions and that sort of thing. Of course, this is being recorded. So hello, my name is Brian. I now work at VMware. It is true that my goal is to get fired for doing something awesome. I don't know what that is, but it's going to be awesome. As a matter of fact, I just had my 2-year anniversary at VMware earlier this month. And this webcast, I'm calling this Pandemic Planning Phase 2. And the reason I'm doing that is because, like all of you, I'm home. This is my house in Seattle. And I've been home now. I think this is my 4th week. Actually, well, my last travel was in February because things started to be wind down and get canceled. But the first week of March, we were still out doing things, and we've been sort of on full lockdown, with all employees working remote, for about 4 weeks. And what I sort of realized was that there's definitely 2 phases. Well, there might be more phases. I'm experiencing, though, the first phase of the pandemic, I called phase 1. That's sort of like the emergency panic. I'm talking from the IT standpoint, right? So obviously everyone, there's health issues, there's family issues, there's like a lot of concerns that are way bigger than work and IT and that kind of stuff. So just recognize when I'm saying the panic, it's like IT panic, put it in context. But it is that panic of, hey, I just walked into work today just as my regular IT person job, and the boss says, but guess what? We need to get ready for all users working from home like tomorrow, and you're in charge. So good luck with that. So that was the very first like sort of emergency panic of how do we even wrap our heads around this concept of, getting all these users at home. And as a matter of fact, I did another webcast a few weeks ago with Sean Bass, who is our CTO for end user computing, where we talked about all that kind of phase 1 stuff. So that webcast is still available for on demand. You have to register for it, but if you go to tinyurl, I got the link there / Brian Sean, you can see that. Because I don't want to repeat the content there, because that was all like the first phase. So if you want to watch that webcast, you can download, you can watch it. That's a lot of the early stuff where we're talking about things like, hey, we have to be ready for people's home broadbands to slow down, or we have to be ready for the cloud to run out of capacity, or we have to be more accepting of people to have dogs in the background and children running around and understanding productivity and that kind of stuff. So that's the stuff, if I tell you that now, you're like, yeah, we've been working from home for 4 weeks. We get it now. So I'm trying to look towards what the next phase is. I feel like we're sort of getting into the middle phase of the pandemic. Like, okay, we're all you know, like we've got jobs, the company's functioning, but we could be in this sort of isolation phase for a few months potentially, maybe longer, who knows. So I think we're in the second kind of longer phase where there is time to sort of, okay, like we got our emergency preparation done and we're alive. Like what can we do now to sort of make life better and more convenient for us in these, you know, sort of next few months? And that's what I really want to look at in today's webcast. And I don't know, maybe there's a phase 3 that we do in 6 months. I have no idea. But one thing I'll say is true, and this is something I found not just within VMware and not just within VMware customers, but just talking to all of my friends who have jobs where they're able to work from home, is everyone is so busy now. And it's kind of funny because there's all these work from home newbies. I've been working from home since 1999. So I'm 21 years now working from home. And it definitely took a few years to like get in the groove of things. So I understand that all these people who are now working from home are just doing all the same stuff that we all, like when I started working from home 20 years ago, it's the same stuff. Like everyone's got to prove how hard they're working. Like, no, I really am working from home. But that means I feel like everyone's just being very chatty and answering, and like there's a lot of thank you emails. There's a lot more chatter as everyone's trying to show that they're working. So I think that's kind of gumming down everything. We also have these 2-minute hallway conversations are all being sort of replaced with actual meetings now. So that kind of stinks because what could have been done in 3 minutes at the water cooler now turns into, you know, a 25-minute Zoom meeting. But coffee in here, although I do see the I also have the bottle of whiskey here on my desk, which is used for the evening happy hours. It's this is my all-day working cockpit from breakfast until until night. Pardon me. From the West Coast, so it's early here still. So you know, we're losing these hallway conversations, which are turning into full meetings. By the way, I had this idea. I'm going to write this on LinkedIn, like a blog post. I want Zoom or someone to create kind of like a chat roulette, but like not used for porn, like a chat roulette for business, where I can say like, hey, I've got 3 minutes until my next meeting starts. I've got 3 minutes available. And then does anyone else have 3 minutes randomly available? Maybe I can specify whether they're in my BU or whatever. And maybe I can just be connected with a random person within my company and just chit chat for 3 minutes. Like, hi, I'm Brian. What are you doing? How are your kids? I think that'd be a fun way to meet people. Anyway, there's just a lot more overhead because our customers, you know, are trying to figure things out. VMware internally, we're trying to make these different, you know, like extend trial periods for licenses and all these special programs, and we're trying to do what we're trying to do to help our customers out, but we're trying to talk to each other all you know, in an inefficient way because we're from home and our customers are working from home. There's just a lot more overhead of everything. So I definitely saw that, like it's just it's functioning, but it's just like really, really slow. And we within IT are all really busy. And look at all these news stories, which, you know, it's kind of A, these are all things we expected to happen in the pandemic, but B, these are things that kind of remind me like, oh, my job's not that bad. Like I would not want to be an Azure cloud, you know, availability engineer right now, or like a Zoom engineer or a Comcast engineer or something like that. So, you know, we're all working through a lot of stuff right now, but I feel like there's some people that are straining a lot more than we all are. But we're getting used to it. And like in little ways, like look at this hair. That's day 21. We're now on day 28. My haircuts recently have been sort of like a military, like, you know, number 8 medium fade. And that's how it was in the first day of the pandemic. And remember back then I was still like wearing different clothes and combing my hair. And, you know, when I was doing webcasts, I would use my small earpieces to look, I don't know, more put together. But now we're kind of getting deeper and deeper into this thing. And it's just kind of like, any video at all. Like right now, my nose is running. I'm about to blow my nose on a webcast. That's going to be a first. That happened like 3 weeks into a pandemic. That we, you know, this is life. This is what we do. Although I do need to give me 1 second. I'll be right back. All right. we're all phoning it in now, right? But I mean, we're all getting used to it. This is how things work. But it's kind of funny the different things that came out in the pandemic as being important. Like, hey, by the way, public service announcement: today is Thursday. My sister, who works at not in IT, but she's got a pretty big team, and she had to remind people on Slack that on a Saturday. She's like, "Hey, everyone, reminder, it's Saturday, so you shouldn't be working right now." But we're getting good at it, and I feel like we're all becoming experts so far at how to survive a pandemic and how to do IT in a pandemic. And the reason I have this slide on here, by the way, is because I love the Olympics, and one of the things I love about the Olympics is becoming an expert in sports that I did not know existed until the Olympics, until I saw them on the Olympics. In the US, that was curling. Never heard of it. And then, it shows up in the Olympics, and you go from never heard of it on day 1 of Olympics to by day 16, you are an expert. You're double second guessing all of their moves. Like, oh, I wouldn't do that. Even though I've never stepped foot on a piece of ice ever in my life, but I'm an expert after 2.5 weeks. And that's what we all kind of are in the pandemic. Like, now we've learned so much about what worked, what didn't work, what we want to do differently, and that sort of thing. Like, we're all sort of pandemic experts now. And so this is something I want to kind of jump into a little bit on this webcast, is like some of the things that we're learning and seeing, and that we're becoming more experts about that are sort of related to the pandemic. And some of these things are definitely more obvious than others. Question came in. Thanks for that. How do you expect long-term effects to be and work from home? Expect companies will find the cost cat's out of the bag? Let's yes. I hope so. Let's table that because I'm gonna come to it. But the question is basically, talk through the impacts of working from home. Will this become the new normal? Oh, goodness gracious, I hope so, because we'll get to that. But so here's some of the things that we're starting to figure out. Obviously, more cloud equals more flexibility, and that's something that's kind of obvious, I think, a little bit. But it's funny because from the corporate standpoint, most people were not into the cloud at all. Just didn't really trust the public cloud. And I think Microsoft changed that, of course, with Office 365 and email. And all of a sudden you're like, well, our mail's in the cloud and essentially all of our documents are. So I guess we can start putting other things in the cloud too. And, we definitely saw that those organizations who tended to put more stuff in the cloud, they now absolutely have more flexibility moving forward. And I'm not just talking about, like, don't confuse cloud with SaaS, right? Obviously, if you're subscribing to software as a service and it's coming from the cloud, especially if it's web-based software, then of course that gives you the flexibility, and you've got Salesforce and Zoom and these kinds of things you can now sort of do from anywhere. But even think about things, and I'll get into this more later on. I mean, even think about how you manage your machines, right? Like, even if you're not using VDI, you're not using DAS, you're not using virtualization, let's just say you've got a bunch of Windows laptops you're managing. Well, if you're managing those the old way with the legacy, like SCCM and group policy, and now those laptops go home, now you've got to deal with, well, they're being updated by servers that are on the network, so I have to get on the VPN, and then I've got to push out GPO updates, but they, there's a half-hour lag in those things. It's kind of just, it's, the sort of legacy SCCM ways of operation are not designed for, they're designed for users in a building. They're not designed for users out in the world. Now, modern management, which is, a function that's built into Windows 10, modern management is something that is absolutely, you can manage machines out in the world, sort of wherever they are. And that's all cloud-based, right? So whether you're using Workspace ONE to manage Windows 10 machines, they're checking in to cloud-based servers, it's using Azure Active Directory, all that kind of stuff. So people, if you think about cloud-based management of Windows 10, that's not something that initially goes in your head. It's like, oh, that's cloud-based, because it's not SaaS. It's still your physical Windows 10 laptops, running your own applications locally and all that kind of stuff. But absolutely, for organizations who move to modern management, those users are able to take all their laptops home and just keep on working with full productivity, because they're not using legacy, PCLM systems. So generally speaking, this is putting the bug in people's minds of, the more that we are relying on sort of like cloud-based backends, the more flexibility we have for future work scenarios. A comment came about Zoom. I mentioned Zoom, saying Zoom is getting banned by almost a lot of federal clients. True. It's funny. I read a great story today which talked about this. Obviously, Zoom is going to double down. Like, Zoom has won the branding game, right? So even though maybe schools are going to ban Zoom, maybe the federal government is going to ban Zoom. I think like, you know, there's famous examples like Google banned Zoom on every employee's laptop, but they have Google like Meet, which is their competing product. But I was like, this is weird that Google is in the news for banning this product on employee laptops. Like, what? Why aren't they just using Workspace ONE and pushing a button? Like, you can use Workspace ONE for real-time, you know, security posture. Like, you don't need to ban specific applications. Like, be more modern. This is weird. But the point is with Zoom, though, is there's two modes of operation with Zoom, right? There's the free version of Zoom, and there's the pay-for version of Zoom. And a lot of these security issues are with the free version of Zoom, because remember, when products are free, you are the product. So all those stuff about like Facebook sharing and, you know, the encryption keys are not secure and that kind of stuff. In the pay for versions, the way that is all handled is different. Now, I'm not saying that if the government wants to ban it, they can ban it, but just be very aware that if there's any product that's free, then that means you are the product and they're absolutely selling your information, you know, in order to make money. So I definitely like the idea of IT using these great products, but we should pay for them so we get like the real version where they don't sell everything. And I think that applies, I mean, not just to Zoom, that applies to a lot of things. The other thing we learned right now is that, hey, a lot of times good enough is actually good enough. And this is something, you know, in the intro, you mentioned like that terminal server book, which I wrote like almost 20 years ago. I've been in IT now 25 years, which means I'm now officially an IT elder, you know, because when you're younger and you just have more enthusiasm for life and you just want everything to be done perfect. You're so like, oh, this should be done this way and this should be done this way. Like, remember how when you're a kid and you're going to college and you're in your 20s and you're like, I'm going to make the world a better place and we're going to have, you know, all college kids are liberals. Like, oh, we're going to do this and this and everyone's equal and it's all fairness and rainbows and everything's great. And then you get older and you understand how the real world works and you get more grizzled and you start becoming concerned about your workload and like paperwork and, you know, this kind of stuff. And you start to realize like, if things work, that's good enough. And I think that's what we're realizing in this pandemic. Like, there's a lot of people who are talking about, you know, even us with Workspace ONE. Workspace ONE is a single unified platform for end user computing. And you can manage your, you know, VDI desktops, your RDS, on-prem, in cloud, you know, persistent, non-persistent, manage physical Windows, manage physical Mac, Chromebooks, iOS, Android, iPads, Apple TVs, rugged devices. Like, you can manage all this thing with one platform, have intelligence, automation, the mobile flows, the security integration, all this kind of stuff. But it's just a lot of moving pieces. And if you have all this sort of like theoretically perfectly built, maybe that would allow you to be more flexible in a pandemic. But the reality is not a lot of people have all this stuff already built. I mean, there's a few customers who are just really forward looking on kind of like bleeding edge of everything, but most people are still like, yeah, we're still getting off of Windows 7. We've got, it's just discombobulated and all these different moving pieces. And I got to tell you what, I'm fine with that. You know, we can always continuously iterate at getting better and better and better. But it's one of these things, if you have VDI on-prem and you all of a sudden have a whole bunch of users who need to work from home and you just get a DAS environment set up, maybe with a different cloud provider than your original one is, and it's not integrated together, and your on-prem, you know, your old on-prem VDI users have to connect to VPN and log into their desktop one way, and your new DAS users have to go to a different URL altogether and log in a different way. I'm fine with that. Like, yeah, it'd be theoretically better if we could like load balance our on-prem to cloud, and you can absolutely still like stretch your fabric and do things like that. But I feel like right now, you know, we just want to get users set up and running. And if I've got different user populations that are doing things in different ways and everything is not all connected in the back end, I don't think I have a problem with that. I just really like, okay, I'm putting out the biggest fires I need to at any given moment. And just let's do whatever's good enough. And maybe go back and revisit, or maybe, you know, like I said, maybe good enough is good enough. And let's focus on what we need to like do our jobs and be happy sort of with good enough. To that end, there is still time for DAS. You know, I said we're in phase 2. Building a brand new Horizon environment from scratch, depending on if you have access to your facility and depending on where your users are, you know, that could be sort of complex, especially if you've never done VDI before. I mean, there's, you know, VDIs, there's a lot to know. And so if you have an existing VDI environment that you're able to grow for some of your, you know, for more home users, that's great. But if you've never done VDI at all, it's, you know, unless you find a consulting partner or someone who can really help you, you know, walk through it, you're probably not going to set up a brand new VDI from scratch just for the pandemic. But, you know, DAS, which is essentially just VDI you're paying for, and whether that's a solution that's on, you know, like VMware Cloud on AWS, whether it's Horizon Cloud on Azure, maybe with, you know, WVD, whether it's on IBM Cloud, whether it's on, there's all sorts of third-party partner clouds that have industry specifics that are using the various DAS platforms. I don't care what platform it is, but the point is that we're going to be in this pandemic phase for a while. DAS can still actually get set up pretty quickly. Like there are some things you have to do, like you're gonna have to figure out how you extend your on-prem Active Directory environment into the cloud provider, but these are solvable problems. Everyone's got experience doing this. We can usually get that figured out within a few days or a week or two. You know, you have to figure out how you're getting your applications installed and your imaging, but all the DAS, you know, the DAS provider is gonna do all the plumbing for your VDI. And it's going to be coming out of some cloud location, not out of your office. So you don't have to worry about your office's bandwidth and VPN and all that kind of stuff. So I really feel like, as I sit here now, you know, kind of mid-April, that if you just want a whole bunch of DAS desktops up and running, I really do believe there's time to do that. I think you could have this running by the end of the month. Assuming you've got the providers have capacity and all that sort of stuff. But I really think that there is time to do this. Now, speaking of time, another interesting thing about this pandemic is Patch Tuesday hasn't happened yet. I mean, the last Patch Tuesday, second Tuesday in April, right? So the second Tuesday in the month. So the last Patch Tuesday, pardon me, was early March while we were still going to the office. But now the next Patch Tuesday, like there has not been a Patch Tuesday since the pandemic because Patch Tuesday hasn't happened yet. If you're just joining us, Patch Tuesday hasn't happened yet. If you're just joining us, Patch Tuesday hasn't happened yet during the pandemic. I mean, think about this. So April 14th, right? This is next Tuesday. It's on Thursday that we're recording this. Well, hi, I see all you in the room. We're doing this live. If you're watching the recording, this is recorded on Thursday, April 9th. Yeah, that's how I look at my watch now because I'm an IT elder. So I don't look at it, see what date is like this. I look at it like this. We're April 9th, 5 days from Patch Tuesday right now. How's that going to go down in your environment? You thought about that? If you got users with laptops and you are managing them with the legacy, like, you know, SCCM and group policy and their domain joined and all this kind of stuff, now these laptops are all out in the world. You know, a lot of us spent a lot of effort over the past years making sure that we protect our networks. Like when Patch Tuesday happens, we want two things to happen, right? We want to update all of our users as fast as possible, and we want to like not destroy our network in the process. And so we've done all this pre-work for Patch Tuesday to do things like make sure the patch is only downloaded once. If it's 500 megs of patches and you got 500 users, I don't want all 500 users downloading 500 megs all at the same time. It's downloaded once to a caching server or distribution point, and then it's pushed out to all the users in the office, or you're doing peer-to-peer or something like that. Well, all these fantastic techniques that you built, they're not going to work when users are at home. And it's almost even worse because you might have GPO settings that are applied that are telling all your machines to get the patches from your own servers, overriding the machine's natural instincts to get them from the cloud. Because, hey, if they're all in the same building, you don't want 500 machines separately downloading patches from the cloud. So you did all that homework to force these machines to download those patches from your office, and now those users are home. How are you even... So first of all, you have to like tell these machines that you want them to download the patches directly from Microsoft, but how do they even get the new policy? Like the users might have to connect. Maybe you don't need the VPN for all users, but you can't apply new group policies unless the users log into the VPN. So you have to get them to like get every user to manually log into the VPN and, you know, then like force policy at refresh so that they can get the new policy to not get it from the VPN. It can be complex, and obviously every situation is going to be different, but just think through that a little bit. Like just envision how that's going to work, and maybe, you know, look at some settings and make sure you're ready for next Tuesday. There's a DAS question. I'm going to put that, we'll keep that one on hold for a second because I'll come back to it. Part of your Patch Tuesday things to think about are your deployment rings, right? Like if you're using deployment rings, you might have like ring 0 as you're testing, and you deploy to those machines first to make sure they don't, you know, explode. And then you might have ring 1, you deploy 12 hours later, which is your critical users, and then ring 2 is 24 hours later, ring 3 is 24 hours after that. Well, think about this. If your patching mechanism is going bonkers, like if all patches are being shoved through the VPN, you don't have the corporate bandwidth, you might actually not be able to patch all the machines within a certain ring during the amount of time allocated to that ring. In which case, imagine if you have like ring 1 is 24 hours and then 24 hours after that ring 2 comes on. Well, what happens if ring 1 is not all the way patched yet, and now you're adding ring 2 on top of that, and now it's going to even take that problem of limited bandwidth and just exacerbate it and slow everything down even more? So think about your rings. Maybe you want to add some artificial timing and space them out. So you're doing 48 hours in between instead of 24, just to give yourself some breathing room. By the way, I mentioned this in the last webcast also, but I want to mention it again just because it's pretty critical. If you're not set split tunneling for your VPN, I mean, obviously, that can ensure that only the required traffic is going over the VPN. So there's a couple customers who are just getting slammed, and we're like, hey, hate to ask, have you looked at that traffic? And they're like, yeah, it was split tunneling or split DNS or whatever. And they kind of look and, oh, actually, there's a lot of stuff here and a couple of config changes, and they can save a lot of bandwidth there. So that's something that that you absolutely can think about. Time, but though, back to the previous slide about the deployment rings and slowing things down, this is going to get to the point where we might need to relax security a little bit during this sort of like more limited work mode during the pandemic, which at first sounds pretty horrible, kind of like, I have standards. I'm not in charge of security. I'm not, if I work in healthcare, that's compliance. I mean, there's regulations and standards. Like, I didn't pick my security requirements arbitrarily. Like, I'm doing what I'm doing because I have to. And so, but there's some reality, some logistics realities that we're seeing, which is like, if all these users working from home means you can't patch them fast enough, did you used to not let them on the network if the machine is not patched? Well, if they have a machine now that's not patched, like, you might need to give them a 48-hour window or something like that where they can still get on the VPN without having a patch machine, just because you can't patch them fast enough, and you might not be able to tell them, no, they can't do it. Or certain things like around HIPAA and doctors and, doctors using personal devices and all this kind of stuff on the sort of the all hands on deck mentality now. It's like, yeah, do whatever you need to do. And the thing is, this is not just an IT issue, that we are seeing this across the board, where security sort of regulations and standards are being relaxed temporarily in order to do what we have to do. And like, as some examples, New York, and I'm on the West Coast, so I'm not super paying attention. I don't think they actually did this, but New York was talking for a while about creating a unified healthcare system for the whole city. I think it was the city, maybe even the state. But the point was, hospitals, public, private, big, small, profit, nonprofit, like just all doctors, all nurses, everyone can practice anywhere, and they're all kind of the same system, and you can be referred to each other, and just make it the same system. But imagine the IT professional sitting behind there, right? Like, you think your job was bad when your boss came to you and said, hey, by the way, all of our users are working from home tomorrow, figure it out. And now, what if your job was working in a hospital, security, IT security in New York, and someone's like, hey, we have to make sure that like any doctor in the city is allowed to come into our hospital and like get onto our patient management system, but doctors only, no criminals. Okay, good luck. By the way, we're doing this starting in 1 hour. So that can be tough. But we're seeing security and regulation standards change, even like the whole medical exams in a parking lot. Like, in the United States here, there's agencies who are required for like certifying that hospitals are safe and clean, unless, yes, you may operate as a hospital. And there's certain standards for what counts as a hospital. And now there's articles about how they change those, and a bed on a parking lot, like, that counts. So you're not alone. If you have to sort of relax some standards in order to get things done, you're not alone in that. But that's something that's sort of happening everywhere. The zero trust laptops, yes. We'll talk about that also. So keep those questions coming in. The Windows 7, look at that. So one of the things that we're seeing with a couple customers is if they're still doing Windows 7 migration, which you're all remote now, so that's great. But there are a lot of people, if I ask for a show of hands, like, a lot of people are still on Windows 7. They're paying for that extra year of the extended security updates, and the idea was that we're on Windows 7 now. Let's get to Windows 10. And then once we get to Windows 10, then we'll flip over to modern management and Workspace ONE and all that kind of stuff. Well, what happened if you're partway through your Windows 10 migration from Windows 7? And a lot of people, even with having new laptops, and they're using like SCCM or these types of things to actually physically upgrade their machines from Windows 7 to Windows 10. And I feel like if you're remotely upgrading machines from Windows 7 to Windows 10, I just don't think you're doing that when all the users are home. I mean, if you can figure that out, let me know. I would be too afraid to. I couldn't do it. I would be too afraid to like use SCCM to remotely migrate a machine from 7 to 10. I mean, people do it all the time. We did 14,000 of them that way internally at VMware. That's the exact way that we did it, was actually using SCCM to go from Windows 7 to Windows 10. And then we used SCCM to push out the Workspace ONE agent. And then we used Workspace ONE to uninstall SCCM. And now we're fully on Workspace ONE, modern managed Windows 10. But we did actually push it out via SCCM. But I don't mind if users are on campus and I can walk them with a loaner. I mean, I don't know. It's too easy to brick a machine remotely when you're doing an OS migration. So I can't see doing that right now. But that doesn't mean that all is not lost. So I was mentioning earlier, you know, and we do have Windows 10 modern management. Well, Microsoft created this modern management capability for Windows 10, and that's something that we can manage with, you know, Workspace ONE. And we are seeing for the people who are trying to do their migration in phases, like most people said, okay, we're going from Windows 7 legacy to Windows 10 modern. So the like most people are doing that in 2 phases, like go from Windows 7 legacy to Windows 10 legacy, then Windows 10 legacy to Windows 10 modern. And now if they're stuck in the pandemic, they're just doing that all in one phase in a side-by-side way. So instead of trying to run their Windows 10 laptop like half in legacy management, half in modern management, they're just saying, you know what, clean break. So even if you've never done any Windows 10 modern management before, and again, we're talking about for physical machines. This is not for VDI. This is for physical laptops out in the field, like replacing SCCM. If you've never done Windows 10 modern management before, you know, in this phase 2 of the pandemic, you do have time to get that set up and running. You know, you need Azure Active Directory. You probably have Office 365 or Microsoft 365 E3. You do not need E5. E3 is fine. You can get Azure Active Directory set up. You can get it synchronizing with your accounts and everything. And then, I mean, you can get Workspace ONE set up, all cloud-based, you know, SaaS as a service. And then you can start deploying new laptops. And these can be laptops that users buy themselves, like just send your user out to Walmart or Best Buy and have them, I mean, like bestbuy.com, walmart.com, Amazon, have them buy whatever laptop they can find. You know, you can buy them yourselves through your dealer, whatever, and have them shipped out to the users directly. With Windows 10 modern management, you don't have to pre-image the machines. It's built into Windows 10. The user just, when they open it, they activate the machine with their work ID, and it'll connect automatically through the Windows Cloud Activation servers into Azure Active Directory, and it links all that back together on the back end, and you're fully managing that machine. And you can do that completely beside your old legacy environment. So your legacy environments got all your old Windows 7 or old Windows 10 already old machines in it. Build a brand new modern environment and just start bringing your home users over. And you can get that full management, and it's now all cloud-based. And it's, you know, real-time management. It's not using your VPN. It's not using your you know, on-prem distribution points and all that kind of stuff. It's you can get there, is my point. And a lot of people were planning to do it slowly in a more phased kind of way. And now I think that's something that people are they're accelerating, and I think you absolutely can do that. So let's go through. Oh, the next thing I want to show. I wrote a blog post, and this was yesterday. And basically, what's better in a pandemic, VDI or VPN? Because that's probably one of the biggest questions that I've been getting in the past few weeks. So this is on blogs.vmware.com. It's kind of annoying at VMware. We have like EUC blogs are in 2 places. So we have that Tech Zone website, and we also have, which is techzone.vmware.com. And then we also have like blogs.vmware.com, and both blogs.vmware.com and techzone.vmware.com both have blogs on them. And my blogs are on both sites, depending on what the topic is. If it's a more technical topic, it's on TechZone. If it's a more businessy topic, it's on VMware blogs. So good luck with that. But if you can manage to find this blog, it's on blogs.vmware.com/EUC. And it's, you know, I talk about what's better in a pandemic, VDI or VPN, because one of the things that, and the answer, by the way, I mean, it depends. It really depends, and it depends on a lot of stuff that I outlined in this in that blog post. Like, take me as an example. Like my actual job, like Brian Madden working in the CTO office at VMware. Do you know what apps I use? Firefox, and Office. That's it. Oh, and Zoom. But honestly, like, I mean, and even Office is not like, that's all I use. I use Office, I use Firefox, and I use Zoom. I don't need a VDI desktop, right? I'm actually using a Mac right now. There's Mac versions of Office, there's Mac versions of Zoom, there's Mac versions of Firefox, obviously. My Mac is enrolled for management from Workspace ONE, and so I've got my little, intelligent hub icon there, and that's where I can launch my applications and all that sort of stuff. But basically, I've just got locally installed apps. My machine is managed, so it's got the VPN certificates. If I need to access a website that's internal only, it'll automatically, I don't even have to like connect to the VPN, it just does it by magic somehow. But the point is, I don't need VDI, right? But there's other users where we might have had like their VDI desktop, their Windows desktop was their full package desktop, and they're accessing a lot of like specific Windows applications or specific client server apps or getting to certain databases or backend systems where if I already have like their whole Windows desktop built and it's packaged and all ready to go, and now that user's home, probably in their case, a VDI might actually make more sense. So this whole article kind of steps through all of the various things that you think about when you're evaluating VDI versus VPN, specifically in a pandemic scenario. But this is not, there's not one versus the other. Like, I should say there's not, like, I can't tell you always VDI in this case and always VPN in that case, because it really depends on your users and the types of applications and where your expertise is and, all of that kind of stuff. So what I want to do now, I want to share this playbook that some colleagues of mine put together, but first I'm going to answer some of these questions and keep these questions coming. So let's see what of them says. So for DAS, for enterprises using on-prem Horizon VDI with extensive app volumes, what's the approach for Horizon Cloud and Azure, which does not support app volumes? Are they supposed to make lots of images with each app combination? That's a fantastic question. So first of all, app volumes is coming to Horizon Cloud on Microsoft Azure, extending Microsoft Virtual Desktop. It's the craziest name ever. I'm not within the product group, so I don't know what the date is for that, but that is definitely coming. But yeah, in the meantime, it can be tough. Like, do you have to make a whole bunch of images for these separate applications? Yes. I don't actually have a good answer to that. Let me ask some people. I haven't thought about that. And so let me think about the best way to get these back to you. How about Twitter? Let's use Twitter. So I'm Brian Madden on Twitter. I'm going to ask my buddy Gabe, who, I've been working with for 20 years, and he's actually the product, he does technical marketing for Horizon Cloud. So he's the guy to ask that question to. So let's find out. Let's see if we don't. That's where app volumes are coming out of the option of portable apps. Yeah, so there's a couple of things that go into there. Maybe we have a blog post already that exists on that. Maybe if not, we'll write one. Okay. So how about deploying thin? Next question. How about deploying thin clients or zero clients, or converting laptops to thin or zero clients, and then let's see, and then bringing this whole patches inside the data center. Yeah. Okay. So this is basically like. This is basically saying that, like, hey, our users who are working from home, what about just either giving them thin clients or zero clients or have laptops that are converted to thin clients? That way, all this patching malarkey is all like limited to the data center, and I'm not trying to patch all these users from home. First of all, love where your head's at. In concept, yes. I'm 100% on board with this in concept. But this presupposes you've got VDI up and running, or I'm saying VDI is all permeations, right? RDS, whether it's on-prem or cloud, VDI, whatever. So conceptually, I like this. Conceptually, I do like this. But like I said, if you don't have VDI, then it's going to be hard to get there. The other problem is, of course, VDI still has a lot of issues. Like Zoom is not good on VDI. I don't know. I mean, it's just all these multimedia applications are not super great on VDI because you're trying to move all the video audio through the remoting protocol, or you're doing it on a sideband through some of their ports or whatever. What I do like, I'm looking around for my phone. I guess I don't need to show you my phone. Are you all aware of what a phone is? What I do like is that, most of us have phones or tablets. So if we are using VDI for like everything, when it comes time to a Zoom meeting, instead of clicking that Zoom link within my VDI session, I can just fire it up on my phone, and that way I'm using like the more simply managed, more easily managed. The phone, I'm running Zoom locally on my phone, and I'm getting full fidelity, and all of that kind of stuff. So I like. So I think if you sort of convert a laptop fully into a thin client, you lose the ability to do any sort of application processing locally, which again is not bad, but just make sure that things like Zoom or whatever collaboration you have, make sure you've got a way to do that works. If VMware within Blast, we have different extensions for like Skype for Business and Teams. But like whether it's full audio or just audio and full video or not video, there's a lot of requirements, and there's a whole matrix of support depending on like what version you have installed in your remote host, what version you have installed in your agent or on your client, what platform the client is, Linux, Mac, Windows. So it's a whole, there's a whole matrix of like support that gets very, very hairy. And that's where I'm just like, dude, just use your phone, connect to Zoom from phone, problem solved. Or again, WebEx, GoToMeeting, whatever it is that you're using. So as a concept, I like it. I love like iGel. A lot of our customers are using iGel. People always ask me like, VMware is owned mostly by Dell, and Dell has Wise, and Wise has thin clients, and I'm sure they're lovely. I see a lot of iGel in the world, and iGel has that USB bootable stick, and you can like download an image and use a USB boot stick, so you can configure that boot stick. You can get the users to put it on a USB, and then they can take any laptop and you plug it into USB and reboot the laptop, and it boots up the Linux-based image off of that stick. And a lot of customers have been using that, so that way you can convert like any computer the user, because maybe the user has some old laptop or old computer that isn't compliant with all your sort of stuff. So you can actually get them up and running pretty quickly. So I like those kinds of things. The last thing I'll just say is that if you're using modern management, remember I was talking about Windows 10 modern management, but that same Workspace ONE for modern management, you also use that to manage Mac, to manage Chrome, to manage iOS, Android, anything like that. And Workspace ONE is all cloud-based. So if you are managing your Windows machines with modern management, then you can manage them very easily outside the firewall. So I want to be very clear. Managing laptops at home is not what the pain in the rear is. The pain in the rear comes from managing laptops with legacy management tools like GPO, AD, SCCM type stuff. That's a pain outside the firewall. But if you're using modern management, that's fine. Okay, next question. Ooh, this is an awesome one. As companies roll out more devices to support work from home, how do they deliver innovation at the same time? It doesn't impede their support teams due to lack of skills. Environment managers. Yeah. Okay. So I think the gist of this question is, it's interesting because we have been in like emergency mode for the past few weeks. And so like innovation kind of stops, right? Like look at this webcast. This is not a webcast that's about like, hey, what's the future look like, and what's VMware's vision, and like, what can we all innovate better? This is like, oh my gosh, everyone's working from home, help me survive. So like all of our work is focused more on tactical and transactional, and not like sort of innovative and like deep type stuff. And I think that's the kind of transition we're starting to have right now, because there's an argument to be made. Everyone is asking me, is 2020 the year of VDI? And I'm saying no for the same reason that I said no forever, which is my reason for that. I've written plenty on this, but the one sentence version is because EUC is about more than VDI. Like I don't want to declare any year the year of VDI, because people might think that, oh, that means that VDI is the answer and we can ignore everything else. And it's like, no, VDI is part of the answer, as is RDS, as is on-prem, as is cloud, as is physical Windows management, as is physical Mac management, device management, intelligence, the collaboration, all this stuff is EUC. VDI is very important, but I told people it's like the alternator in your car. If you have an internal combustion engine car, you're not going anywhere without an alternator. You definitely want the alternator, but like you bought the car, you didn't buy the alternator. And so my point is ironically, a lot of people who are on the fence to VDI got off the fence due to the pandemic, because it's like, oh my gosh, all my users have to be home instantaneously. Let's get all these users like, what do I need? Hey, VDI, boom, done, off we go. So I think that we can be more innovative, because it's the same thing like the innovations around the telepresence and like remote meetings and that sort of stuff. This is forcing a lot of innovation. So we might be able to see things like maybe it's going back to the app volumes question, right? So maybe you're using app volumes on-prem. You got to do something else in the cloud. Maybe there's something you can do with Dynamic Environment Manager. Or maybe you can start to do things now like all the users are working from home and you've got GPOs and roaming profiles and that's just not working too well. Maybe you can use, like the Microsoft FS Logic technology with VMware Dynamic Environment Manager and set up a more kind of modern cloud-based persona solution, even if you're still managing Windows the old way. So I still think that, there's things you can do to more better, that's not said right, to manage your users better out in the world, that there's steps you can take right now that are very tactical and very transactional and will actually improve things, but will also be not throwaway steps, right? So like I said, if you transition from like roaming profiles to, like mandatory profiles with Dynamic Environment Manager, things like that. So I think there's a lot we can do, but it's gonna be very tactical based. But you're gonna get better. You're gonna get better. You will figure out by the time this pandemic ends, you will figure out how to onboard a new laptop that you've never touched before. And whether it's factory imaging and you're doing old school Active Directory joins, whether it's like the new, modern like AutoPilot or factory provisioning, which is different from factory imaging, whether it's one of these new methods where the machine is drop shipped, or whether it's the out-of-box experience for BYO hardware, you're going to get all that stuff figured out during this pandemic. And you don't forget that when the pandemic ends, right? So it may just be, you may end up with a much more streamlined laptop delivery process because it's not like going on your depot to your desk and then going off to the user. You may end up with a more streamlined process that you build for this pandemic. And then you just keep on doing that once the pandemic ends and you've kind of gotten that innovation, like, yeah, now we have that. So that is a cool thing. Okay, there's a question about the future and the challenges, which I'm gonna cover at the end. Let me jump back in these slides here. Keep these questions coming in. This is fantastic. We actually have, we got all the time you want, so don't worry. So the playbook, this is a playbook that some of my colleagues put together, and it was really good. So I just want to share this as well, and what their sort of some specific steps that they're guiding people. Any How I Met Your Mother fans out there? This is my, that's my Barney Stinson font, I guess. So, okay, so they put out like 6 steps on, like specific plays you can do if you are an existing sort of, Horizon customer or Workspace ONE customer. So the very first thing that these folks are recommending is establish some employee communications portal. And so this is just somewhere that allows, your users just need a way that they can check in and see what's going on. I believe, like, for example, internally at VMware, we have not done a very good job of this. And that's how I know it's important because, some of our communications come down via email and with the note, like, disseminate this to your teams. So I hear some communications coming from down the management chain. We have like our intranet site, which has like, the COVID-19 portal set up. HR's got their own page talking about travel and work policies. Then we have company-wide all hands meetings where we talk about stuff. Then we have like BU wide, like EUC has its own meetings. And so if I want to go right now and find out what VMware's like latest policy travel thinking is, there's like, I'm looking at an email, I'm going to a bunch of different web pages, and it's kind of a hodgepodge a little bit. And so one of the recommendations has been to pull everything together in one space. If you're using Workspace ONE, you have the Workspace ONE Intelligent Hub. That's what we're showing here. There's the iOS version for phones. There's a Windows version. There's a Mac version. There's an Android version. There's a web version. And you log in there, and it's got, of course, it's got our applications. It could potentially have links to, web apps and local apps and Horizon desktops, Citrix apps, everything. But you also have in here, in addition to the apps, we've got links to our internal websites. We've got in the VMware one internally, it's like our mobile flows and our micro applications. It ties into our notifications that gets pushed out. It ties into our people search where I can like look for people and their managers, and all that is sort of built in this app. But there is a notification framework, and that notification framework does work in both directions. And we have like the users can communicate up as well. And we've used this in various situations before. Like when there was the fires in California, we pushed out to all of our employees in California, like, hey, there's fires going on. Are you cool? Or do you need anything? And you could like check, like, I'm okay, or I need some help. And we did that automatically based on like where the user's physical device was. So not what office you were supposed to work at, but like every user's device that's in the California area, push out this notification. So I think that's the first thing. And it doesn't matter if you're using Workspace ONE or not, like have an intranet, just have a place to go, like have one place to go where like there's like the home page you know, if you will, for your users, where you can communicate with them, provide them links to everything that they need. The next thing is, you know, remember I talked about good enough being good enough? That's what this MVP is, right? The minimal viable product. Like what's the minimum, like what's the lowest level stuff I have to do to get people, you know, up and running? And the very next thing is just to do the inventory of like currently what you have available of applications and resources and everything, and then figure out what that minimally viable, you know, like home working product is going to look like. And I'll give you a perfect example. Like me, again, I made it very clear. I use Office, I use Firefox, and I use like Zoom. I mean, those are the only apps that I need. So if our IT department is looking at me and they're like, they can look at what I use or ask whatever, they can pull logs, whatever method you have to collect this information, survey, doesn't matter. But for me, I don't need VDI. Don't waste a VDI on me. Like, don't waste the dollars, don't waste the capacity. I'm good. And so first is just to figure out like who actually needs what. And then you start looking at like optimizing your environment, or if you want to add any capacity or, you know, move things around a little bit. One irony is if you are on-prem, you may have more control over hardware than you have in the cloud environment, because a lot of the cloud providers are starting to run out of room. And so, or they're just, you know, maybe they're not running out of room altogether, but the specific VM types you're using, they don't have available, so you have to go higher or lower or whatever. Within your own environment, even if the servers were not designed originally as VDI servers, I feel like those are things that you can, you know, repurpose. And maybe, yeah, theoretically you want GPUs in your servers if users are web browsing, but maybe you've got other applications that don't need the GPU. So you can still sort of like work some things around and figure out what you have and you know, start to think about how you can use that, because there is a lot of computing capacity that's in your data centers that might not be being used right now. And then, so the next thing, of course, is as you're going through that, now to start linking things together. So we had this portal where I said, this is where all the users are going. Start pulling in the resources. Obviously, if it's Workspace ONE and you're using our Workspace ONE Intelligent Hub in whatever form, that kind of becomes automatic as you are publishing and sharing resources in there. But again, like a web page on an intranet is fine with links. Here's for these users to click. Here's DAS Provider 1. Here's DAS Provider 2. Here's DAS Provider 3. Here's links to Office 365 login. I mean, if you know, here's links to go download Office yourself from Microsoft.com using your work ID, so it doesn't, you know, don't pay for it, etc. So just start to pull all this, like look at everything you have, start to pull that together into whatever portal it is that you're using. Another thing you can pull in there is providing remote access to the physical PCs that might be in your office. And so this is something that this is using Horizon. It's just that when you're connecting, you know, you go through the same portal, the same connection process, the same agents, all that kind of stuff. It's just you're connecting back to physical PC in a darkened office. Now you're not connecting into a VM on a server or in a cloud. So the idea is if you have users who have desktop PCs, or if you have users with desktops who are now no longer at their desktop, or if you have to like have multiple users in shifts sharing machines, this is something that you can do. Horizon is like sort of always supported this. Like there's never really anything stopping you from installing that Horizon agent on a physical machine and then connecting to it. It's just not something that was done a lot, and we didn't really advocate. Like it was just something people didn't really do. And so obviously in the past month, everyone's like, oh my gosh, can I use Horizon to connect back to remote PCs? And the answer is yes. Oh, and by the way, you can use this like with a full blast protocol. If the PC has a GPU in it, you can leverage a GPU, you can have multiple display. Like it's legit. It's full on legit. But it's something that people just didn't do up until like a few weeks ago. Now, so to that end, we actually, we created a lot of resources to help you with this. So if you go to that Tech Zone website, techzone.vmware.com, or this is the article, just do an internet search for this article, like, you know, Horizon 7 physical Windows machine. You'll find this article. I think it was Robert Terkaitis who wrote this, but I don't want to give credit to the wrong person. A bunch of people worked on this, and it's a whole step-by-step. Here's how to step-by-step get your Horizon environment set up. And frankly, even if you don't have Horizon already, you still can download the bits and get it set up. If you've got a vSphere instance with some capacity, you can actually get this all set up, having never done any Horizon before. Because remember VDI, a lot of the hard issues of VDI, like, I mean, anyone like kind of more junior level IT tech can download the Horizon components, you know, from VMware, can set up a few VMs, can walk through our installation guide and like get it all set up around. Like anyone can get it running, right? VDI is not hard because you got to set up some connection servers and gateways. VDI is hard because of how are you managing all your VMs and the images and the applications and the patching and like the logons and all this kind of stuff. Well, for this specific use case, we're talking about your physical PCs that already exist. Like those are, however you manage those, you've been doing it for years. So in this case, Horizon is very easy because all you're doing is setting up the infrastructure and connecting back to stuff that exists already. And you're not trying to solve all these like login, scripting, non-persistent imaging issues. You're just using the machines you already have. So this article walks you through it. We actually even developed a bunch of tools to help you. So these are all on GitHub. And the article has links to all these things. But my point is, we realized when people started doing this, they were like, oh, this machine's turning itself off because the power save, it went to power save and now it's asleep. And now I can't connect to it. Or this machine I can't connect to because the firewall rules are configured and the Horizon agent can't get through the firewall to establish the connection back. Or like things like that. So we wrote a bunch of like, Chris Halstead and Andy Morgan, a couple of my colleagues, wrote some various tools that will like help you install the agent, get the firewall and power config. Andy actually wrote a bunch of other tools, I don't have them linked here, that do Wake on LAN. So it can integrate Wake on LAN. So if a user tries to connect to a machine that's turned off, it can remotely power it on. And he actually, and then some users were like, oh, that's great, but I've got some machines on a different subnet. So then he wrote some extensions to that so they can talk to each other across subnet. So you can drop a little gateway, which can be a Raspberry Pi or anything in a different subnet, and they'll relay Wake on LAN commands across subnets. So my point is like, we're all kind of figuring this out together, but you know, we're trying to help out, like whatever you need to get it running. Like we've got folks who are building it and figuring out sort of as we go along. So I think that's, you know, the connecting back to physical is something that is actually very legit right now. Another feature, if you are using Horizon, which is actually like, it's a really good feature of Horizon and something I don't think gets enough credit. We have session collaboration. And so this is like, if you're in a Horizon session, there's a button you can hit in the corner and you can actually invite people to share your session with you. And so you see right there, like you enter names or emails, it'll go to the gal and pull them in automatically. You can click an email, it can IM to a user, you can just copy a link on a clipboard, and you can paste it, then someone can click it. If that person doesn't have a Horizon agent installed, you know, they can connect via the web agent, HTML5, like blast, all that sort of stuff. But it's cool because we can do, I think we support up to 10. It might be more than that. It's at least 10. So we can have 10 people share the same session. It was cool. It's using all your Horizon infrastructure. So like, yes, I get it that like you can use Zoom for screen sharing, and there's other screen sharing things. Obviously, Zoom and the third parties have other security issues. You have to make sure that you've got all kind of set up properly. But what's cool is like, if you're using Horizon today, you already figured out, like you trust Horizon, you already have your access gateways in place, you already have your agents in place, you got your secure tunneling, like whatever you're doing to make Horizon work in the world, like you've already gone through that work. And you get this feature is like, it's for free, it's built in. It's literally like right click, share my session. And so you can have a bunch of users collaborating. This is great for your help desk, of course. It's actually raw Horizon sending out multiple streams to users. So it's good performance for everybody. You know, again, like GPU, 3D, all that kind of stuff. That's all working. So that's been a Horizon for probably 6 months, a year now. Like it's been there for a bunch of versions. And no one really talks about it, but it's a pretty grand little feature. Another thing that's worth mentioning is we're talking about the VPN versus VDI. Remember, if you are using Horizon, we have the universal access gateways. Oh my gosh, that is an errant apostrophe. I apologize for that grammar. Remove apostrophe on UAGs and VPNs. But remember that if you have VPN capacity issues, right, whether it's like bandwidth issues or whether it's just connection issues, remember, you do not need a VPN for Horizon. You can use the VMware Universal Access Gateway, which is actually used for, you know, Horizon sessions. It's used for a bunch of other things too, like within Workspace ONE. But you can use the EUGs. There's not a separate license for it. It's a simple, it's a virtual appliance. It runs on all the cloud platforms. It runs on all the virtualization platforms. It runs our hardened open source Photon OS. It's cool. And so if you're not using UAG and you've got a lot of Horizon users, maybe think about implementing that, and that can free up some VPN space. Okay, last slide I want to talk about is on some things looking ahead, and then we're going to go back to these questions coming in. And again, please send more questions. I'll go back. Back to our old conversation from a few seconds ago about the physical There we are, the physical. Chris Koch writes, the trick of broken physicals is you have to have Windows 10 Enterprise to use Blast. Everything else is RDP only. So RDP has the limitations of multiple monitors, no dynamic resizing, not being able to use Mac Horizon clients, yada, yada, yada. So yes, you have to have Windows 10 Enterprise, which like theoretically you're supposed to have that anyway, I think, for everything business related. So hopefully most people should have that, but that is a fantastic note. Okay, so going back to this looking ahead thing, and one of the comments here, which is fantastic, says you cannot solve today's problems, you cannot solve tomorrow's problems with yesterday's approaches and yesterday's thinking. And truer words could not be spoken right now. It's and we can talk about this with the modern management stuff. The way that traditional PC management works today with SCCM and with Active Directory and group policy, all of those technologies are from the late 90s, right? Like think about that for a second. The late 90s, Wi-Fi didn't exist. Like think about that for a second. Wi-Fi did not exist. Those PCMCIA cards we were putting on our laptops had dongles to connect to Cat 45 or RJ45 connections, right? They were not Wi-Fi. So SCCM, group policy, Active Directory, all that stuff is from when a computer sat on a desk, not when it's out in the world. You cannot manage computers out in the world with that technology. And I want to be very clear. Microsoft agrees. This is not like a pro VMware bashing Microsoft. I mean, the technology is from the 90s. Of course, it doesn't apply today. And Microsoft themselves Microsoft says the same thing. Like, no, you have to get off of SCCM and group policy and move towards, in Microsoft world, is Intune and CSPs and all that kind of stuff. In our world, it's Workspace ONE. We compete against each other on that way. But we both agree SCCM is not used for managing, or is not good at managing random machines out in the world. And so this is absolutely an opportunity where you can modernize that. To some of the points that people talked about earlier, I believe that what we're going to see out of this is that remote is the new normal, or that remote is like more normal. So I just had my 2-year anniversary at VMware. My first year, I flew nonstop. I did like 300,000 miles. It was insane. I asked for it. Sean, my boss, I caught it on like, hey, what do you want to do here? I'm like, I've never worked for a vendor. I've never worked at VMware. I just need to learn the story and the customers. And I said, just put me on an airplane for a year. I had just come out of a relationship. I wasn't sure where I wanted to live. Like, I got time. And so I said, put me on an airplane for a year. And that first year, I met like 160 customers in person all over the world. It was crazy. And it was awesome. But I traveled a lot for a year. And now I don't want to travel anymore. The problem is that all of my coworkers got used to me like, oh, Brian wants a meeting. Yeah, we can call him. Brian's going to show up. So I've been trying to convince people that like virtual meetings are valuable enough that we don't have to go in person for a thing. And that's the point. When you go in person, people know, oh my gosh, it took you 2 days to get here. We must be very important. Not mentioning like, yeah, it took me 2 days to get here, but I'm meeting 7 other clients and doing 2 seminars while I'm here. So you ain't that special. Which is my point. I mean that in a way of love. All of you watching, if I came to your meetings, you were special enough to get me there. But guess what? What's better? Me talking to 1 customer or 2 customers per day, or me talking to 8 customers per day from home? Because I think everyone is better off if I'm talking to more customers, because I'm bringing more perspectives into meetings. So my point is, I think that my personal crusade of like wanting to do more and more remotely is now going to be shared by a lot of people. There's so many jobs that we said like could never be done from home until we had to do it from home. And it's like, and I think we're going to learn things too. Like, we're going to learn about, like why you really have to go to the office. So do you have to go to the office 5 days a week, or like, 1 day is good? Maybe we all decide that like, hey, Wednesday, everyone's in the office. Like maybe that just becomes the theme at companies like VMware Palo Alto. Maybe it might be per BU. Creekside E, where end user computing lives. Maybe we all decide that everyone's in the office on Wednesdays, and then everything else is working from home. And so I think we're going to, this remote work will be the new normal, or absolutely more normal. And again, VDI is not the answer for all this. I mean, like I said, lots of users running full laptops with full local applications is absolutely the cheapest and most efficient and best performance way, best experience. But we have to manage those with Workspace ONE in the new cloud-based modern management, not the sort of old ways. So I think this will become more normal, and these ways to manage remotely are going to become more and more important. By the way, a big culture shift, which I think a lot of people are not talking about yet. I haven't heard this conversation yet, but think about this. Where am I sitting right now? I mean, you know Seattle because I told you that, but if I didn't tell you Seattle, you have no idea. I mean, I've got a nice microphone. It sounds like I'm inside your head. So I could be in Seattle. I could be in Kauai. I could be in Singapore. Who knows? But think about this. If we get to be more normal where more employees can work from home, we now are going to really globalize our workforce, because now you really are competing against that person halfway around the world for your job, as long as they're willing to get up to attend the meetings in the right time zone. And what that means, though, is I think IT is going to go. It's not IT outsourcing. It's not offshoring. It's just as more users are remote, that allows us to cast a wider net that goes all the way across the country or all the way across the world, where we might include some less expensive areas of living, which will give the business a big incentive to want to encourage this type of behavior, which is going to lead us as IT to have to support remotely more remote users who are farther away, which is going to just even more drive up the importance of having a good, solid remote management solution. And again, VDI is not the answer for all of that. VDI makes sense in a lot of cases. I love VDI, but we're not making all these users across the world VDI. And that's what's going to be important. This HomeKit is something I've been advocating for a long time. And I know that Apple has used that word for something else, but so a lot of people, when they work from home, you're seeing this week, they don't have the right equipment. You cannot sit on a dining room table and a dining room chair for 8 hours a day. Like, the ratios aren't right, the chair back, it's just, you can't. We see people trying to connect remotely, but they're using the webcam that's built into their laptop, and they're using the built-in speakers, and like they sound like they're talking it's just not super great. And I've been saying for years, if you buy users like all the stuff they need, like imagine if we talk about this at VMware, when you join VMware, you get, we use Workspace ONE, we use it with Workday for the onboarding, so you can pick your laptop, you can like check off, like I want a Mac, and here's what size and color, and do you want an external monitor, what the doodads do you want, like a little adapters and thingies like that. You pick all that stuff from our like HR catalog or whatever. It's all integrated with Workspace ONE on the back end somehow, which I'm not in IT at our company, so I don't know what they do, but I'm an employee. I pick it there and it works. But my point is, why is that just limited to IT stuff? Why not have like this chair? It's the steel case model X. What color do you want? Want to pick this desk? It's the standing and raising desk. What color do you want? What size? What service? What monitor arm? How about the microphone? You give everyone a good microphone, and like, even a microphone, the mic arm, the headset, the little capture box, the speakers, what is all that grand total? Like the webcam, this is just a Logitech 922. It's a $60 webcam. So for $500, even put the chair and desk in, for $2,000, you can build a user, like a perfect home work environment that's kind of really great. You can put some lights, they can collaborate fantastically, sound great, perfect. So I'm saying, man, $2,000, that's the cost of one business trip. By the time you work in like all the productivity time lost, the flights, the hotel night, that sort of thing. So I really think we're going to see companies going towards like, we're buying you the stuff to work from home or work from wherever you are as part of your job. And that's a perk of working at a company. And I believe that that's because it will be the more normal. So I absolutely believe that this way of working will become a lot more important in the future. The thing is, man, you can never prepare. And in the United States, there's a lot of political arguments right now about, did we know, did we not know, were we ready, were we not ready? But most of those arguments are around like the pandemic itself. And no one thought, I never saw an argument. I mean, yes, of course, people were warned about pandemics. There's literally movies about this, right? Like, we are all aware that theoretically, no matter how we didn't think it would happen, but we all knew theoretically a pandemic can happen. But we never thought through, if a pandemic happens, that means all my users are working from home for 90 days, right? Like, we never thought about our economy stops for 90 days. We never thought about these kinds of things. And so I'm saying we will never be able to fully prepare for the unknown because we don't know what the unknown is. But we do know that the companies who had more flexibility for where their users work, those companies were more able to weather this. Internally at VMware, I'll say the same way, right? I mean, I work from home on a regular basis. Even a lot of the workers who live in the Bay Area around Palo Alto, who like work from the office, they still go to the office. I mean, they've always been this way for years. Like they're in the office a few days a week. They work from home a few days a week. VMware, we've been using Zoom a lot ever since I joined the company 2 years ago. We obviously have Workspace ONE and Horizon and all these things already set up and in place. We remote employees we onboard employees in a remote way. We've been doing that for a long time. So for VMware, we didn't know that the pandemic was coming and what we had to prepare for, but we had a lot of flexibility. Like we are using modern management for all of our Windows 10 machines, right? With Workspace ONE. So we had these building blocks in place that we were more flexible because we were able to support users anywhere and have as much sort of in the cloud. And so I think these are the kinds of things that that we're going to be looking for. So it's just putting us in a position to be more flexible to where I can separate. Like I just don't want to have what a user can do should have no linkage to where they are in the world, right? And if I can just look at every day, how do I break that linkage between how a user can function and where they are in the world? The more of that linkage I can break, the more flexibility we're going to have in the future. And I think these are the kinds of things that we're going to have to sort of all look for. With that's all I had here. Let me look. There's a couple more. There's a couple more questions coming in. I'm gonna put my turn my screen off so you can see us in big faces. Let's see. Where can I go to get more information about VMware Workspace ONE? There's probably a perfect URL for that, and I don't even know. I would say Google VMware Workspace ONE. I'm not even being facetious. VMware.com somewhere. But yes, can it be test driven for free before fully purchasing it? Yes. And if so, where can we download it from? I would say to the person who wrote that question, reach out to your VMware contact. If you don't know who that is, send me an email. I'm Brian at VMware.com, BRIAN, Brian at VMware.com. If you go to that TechZone website I mentioned, techzone.vmware.com, you can click on Workspace. There's a Workspace ONE icon right at the top of the screen, and there's like a whole like learning path, so it steps through what it is and how it works. But we have these test drive environments that are like all the way ready to go, like already functioning. You just log in and start playing with it through your browser immediately. So one of my VMware coworkers will have to get that set up for you, but we just have to add your name to the account and you can play with it. We also do have versions you can try. I mean, some of Workspace ONE is as a service, so you're trying it as a service. Some of it you can download. And I know that we've also extended our trial dates. I think our free trials were like 30 days before, and now they've been extended out to 90 days. Don't quote me on those numbers, but they've been extended so that people can have more time to play with it. And we're even allowing production users into trials and that sort of stuff. So reach out to your VMware colleagues. If you don't know who it is, hit me up, Brian at VMware.com. Like I said, techzone.vmware.com is going to be the place to go there. Are there enterprises who are supplying Linux desktops via Horizon to end users? Yes, absolutely. So our Horizon product is for delivering remote desktops or remote applications, whether it's from on-prem, whether it's from, as I said, a public cloud, a different DAS provider. But you can absolutely deliver Linux desktops as well. Obviously, a Linux desktop depends if you have Linux applications. Some people, like every so often, it pops up people try to like have no Microsoft in their environment, and so they say, hey, we're going to use like G Suite, and we're going to use Linux desktops, and that's fine. Remember, your desktop choice is basically driven by your applications. So if you have Windows applications, then you're not going to be able to use Linux desktops, or you have to like double hop. So you could have a Linux desktop, but then use Horizon RDSH to publish down a single instance, seamless window of Windows into the Linux desktop. But yeah, if you got apps that run Linux, I know there's a lot in the oil and gas, oil exploration, engineering type apps that are like that. Yeah, absolutely. You can have Linux desktops in your Horizon environment and then deliver those down. And of course, then your users can be using any device they want and access that Linux desktop. Let's see. I think that is it. So I don't know if anyone else has any questions or if any of my other, sort of like co-hosts have any questions or anything. But from my standpoint, I think I'm all set. So, fire in some last minute questions if you have them. Otherwise, any questions you have, like I said, hit me up on Twitter, email me later. I want to write blog posts on this stuff, like the whole remote. We're going to be more remote now, and that's users more in the world. Like that's a blog post I'm going to be writing. I probably won't have time until this weekend to do that. I did a blog yesterday. I'm doing a couple posts a week. At least it feels like it. So any questions you have, let me know. I'll write a blog post and get it out there. But since I don't see anything else from anyone else in the audience, I don't see anything from my colleagues, I'm going to turn it back over. And if anyone else jump in.
Yeah, Brian, I haven't seen the news from HR yet, so that's good news, but you were awesome today. Thanks so much for the energy. I don't know how you did that without having any live audience to interact with, but it was awesome. And yeah, thanks for helping us with some great insights. As we mentioned at the beginning, this presentation was recorded and your TAM will make that available to you. And please be sure and join us next month when Kit Colbert will explain why VMware is the fastest path to modern applications. Thanks so much.